Hi, I'm Brodie. This is my shop. Welcome. This is the project we're working on, and it's an electric mountain bike. It's powered by a Bosch motor that fits in here. This is just a fixture with the bottom bracket. And since we saw you last, this is section 2 or part 2 of the videos. And I've done the welding, so all the head tube is welded onto the down tube. I got the top tube welded onto the down tube. So what we're going to do today is to work on the back, the rear part of the frame, chain stays, seat stays. But first we're going to weld the top tube onto the seat tube. We're going to face the head tube, and then after that we're going to make sure that the head tube is aligned with the seat tube on the surface table. So let's go over to the TIG welder, do a little welding. There we go, that's a full circle of weld. So we'll face the head tube next. Okay, I got cutting oil. I'm going to put some in each end and a little bit on the face. It's not lubricating oil, it's cutting oil. There's a big difference. Here's the cutter. I'm going to spin it really slow. I think it's about 90 RPM, not very fast at all. This frame weighs quite a bit, so. Okay, I got a cone at this end. This is what centers the head tube. Right now, I don't have any slop, so I'm gonna back off on the tailstock. See how I got a little bit of slop? That's what I want. Hold here, and then I'm gonna switch on, and then I move the tailstock in. Here we go. What's happening now is it's reaming the inside of the tube, and you see how the head tube is coming up to the cutter. That's what's going to make the end of the tube square. It's called facing. And you'll be able to see a little bit of chip. There you go. Okay, see the chips coming off? It actually makes a different noise. Okay, I back off a little bit, switch it off. So that's what it looks like when it's been reamed and faced. So now it just needs to have the burrs taken off. We're going to do the second end. Put some more cutting oil. There we go. It's facing the end. And I think we'll call that good. Okay, see all the, I want you to look at this, see all the chips? It takes out quite a bit of metal. That all came out from inside the head tube. So I need to put a little chamfer on the inside. I'll use a deburring tool. Okay, see the chip coming off? See that? Now we'll check the alignment. It's got a cone on the bottom, cone on the top. There's a ramping system on both of these, and it locks together. Can you see where it fits together? And then we turn it, and we pull it apart, and that locks it. Okay, so we have a gap here, so I'm going to take a C-clamp and a wooden block. I'm going to hold this down here, and then I can pull on this. I'll probably put a long bar on there. So close. Just a little bit more. Oh, look at that. There's no gap. I like that. Okay, we have a pair of chainstays here. They've got a nice bend on them, a fairly good bend because it has to go around a large tire. It's a 2.8, a 29. Normally what happens on a bottom bracket shell, that's a standard bottom bracket shell, nothing oversized. You miter this. You take a hole saw, you hold this in the mill, you take a cut, and it fits right on. What's going to happen on this bike, because the tire is so wide, it has to be notched so that the part of the stay comes down the side here, which I've never done before. So we're going to use an end mill to do that. So it's going to be interesting to set that up in the mill, because this isn't flat, it's at an angle. It's about 13 degrees. So I have to do a left and a right. I can't just do them both the same like I normally do. Here's the chainstay, here's the tire. This is the Bosch shell, I'll call it the Bosch shell. And that's where the nut goes for that holds on the chain ring onto the motor. So you can see where the chainstay is going to go, because it has to clear. Here's the tire. It's going to clear the tire. It's got a 1/4 inch of clearance. So this has, see, it's got the notch. That's what I got to do on the mill. I'm gonna put that notch in there. I've never done anything quite like that before. So I have a jig here. A lot of frame builders have one jig. It does everything. It builds the whole frame. You use it for the whole frame. I'm a little different. I've got one jig for the front triangle. I got one jig that all it does is the chain stays, and then I have a seat stay jig as well. So the bottom bracket is going to go in here. I had to modify the jig. I had to bring this out 1 1/4 inches because all this is hitting. And then normally what this does, this holds the head tube up at the right angle, so I get the chain stays on at the correct angle. But because this is so heavy, and this part here of the Bosch shell motor mount was hitting on the jig here, I had to extend it, and then because this is so heavy, it wants to weigh it down. I've got a floor jack, and I'm going to put a piece of 2x4 in there, and that's going to hold the front of the frame up at the right location. Never done this before, ever. This is new for me. There we go. So it's holding the bottom bracket. I bring it down, I rest it on here. So how my particular jig works is the chainstay length is fixed. I can raise and lower the axles here, and the seat stay length is fixed. So on the drawing I measure from the back of the seat tube to the axle, and that's how I know that the frame is in the right position. So what I do is on the drawing I mark the very end of the seat post there, that's the very edge, and I measure from there down to the axle. Oh, and I get 473, and then I subtract half the width of the axle, and I get 469. So that's my mark. I put it in red so it's easy to see. See, I need the edge of the seat tube to come up to there. So by raising this, there it goes, a little bit too high. There you go, 469. So I like that. That's the center of the stay. I'll measure how wide the chainstay is. So this stay over here and the other stay need to be right in between those lines. So that's where the stay goes. See that red mark? That's the apex of the bend. When I hold it like that, I take a felt pen and I mark it that gets the widest part of the tire. So they're going to be held like that. Mark where the V-block is, so I put it back in the same spot each time. I like a bigger felt pen for this. So I got my V-block there, and I'm sighting down. I got the chainstay lined up with the dropout. I make that my cut mark right there. That's where I hacksaw the end off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a mark on the V-block here, like that. Extend this line a little bit. So the angle is going to be off the 90. So I've lined up there and here over at the 180. So this here, the middle, I know it says 90 here, but I'm calling that 0, so it's 11 degrees. 11 degrees. So I got two angles I gotta take note of. 11 degrees for this cut, and I also have to angle the vise at 13 degrees for the right and the left. So I got my red marks here. Those red marks, that's where the V-blocks go. And I'm going to set that up. There's 11. So I'm going to angle the vise now. So there we go, there's 13 degrees there. That looks okay. We'll go for that. If I take a square and I square this angle plate with the mill table, I can still use this as a stop, because if you look, see how it goes up like that, and it's going to come quite right across there. So the other stay is going to end up over here. So I have to cut back to this line here, and then I also want to go down to leave just the edge there. I don't want to go past the edge, so I leave the edge for welding onto the Bosch shell. We're kind of testing the waters here, that's so to speak. Okay, so we can raise the table and we can move it over. So I got a straight edge here, across like that. So if I measure that, so it says 86 thou, so that's how much more I have to take off, and then that comes right next to the Bosch shell. I'd say that's good. I'd say the angle ended up really good, and I didn't really do any filing on the stay at all. So this side worked out well. I'm happy with that. Now we have to replicate the other side. So my stress level will probably go up another notch, making them match. Let's go to the mill. So if I put this in here in the V-blocks, it's going to be at the same spot because I'm still using this here as a stop. There we go. That looks good. So I think I'm happy with that. I think that's going to be just fine. So now we need to miter this end here. I'm on the drawing. I'm looking at the chain. These are the chain stays coming in. This is the axle line. So I need to figure out the angle of the miter. So I put my little protractor on there, and I get it's about 9.5 degrees. So what I do is I put an M for miter, 9.5 degrees. So this this fits into the vise. It's got a couple Allen screws that hold it where I want. It's got a little shelf. That's what holds up the stay. And then this is at an angle, and I can adjust the angle. So what the nut and the bolt does is it allows the fixture to be adjustable so that you can hold a tapered tube. See, this is tapered, and see how that's tapered, and this has to rest against the vise. It's still got a little bit of gap there. So how you tell how it's holding it, when you make the vise a little bit tight, when you move the stay, it's holding here more than there. I want it to hold here more than here so that this doesn't move when I miter it. So I need to do a little bit of adjustment here. See how it's moving? It's held up here and it's moving here. That's what I want. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And then we're going to miter up to that line. Can you see that line there that I've scribed? I put some red felt pen, and then I took a scriber, so that makes a really fine line. So that's what we're going to do. Okay. Okay, I think we can do a little tacking. Get these chainstays on. There you go, a little wedge there. Because I like to put a tack right in the corner, right on the edge there. Of course, everything's up in the air a bit, but that's where the head tube lines up, the down tube lines up, and the stays and the dropouts are right where they should be. So that's good. That's a confirmation that things are working out. So I'll go back and do a little bit of welding, and then a bridge tube. Done. I'm taking out the axle off the jig, and then we've got the back wheel. We're going to put the back wheel in. We're going to look for the clearance here. On the drawing it says 1/4 inch. Well, it's got about maybe 1/2 inch. There's lots of clearance for the crank, so that's not an issue at all. So this is called an alignment stick, and it has a pointer and you can move it. So what we normally do on a frame, you put this on the, well, that'll work, except this is getting in the way, so I need to hold this in the vise here. So this tells you if the wheel is in, well, the back axle is in line with the seat tube and the head tube. And you want it to just be almost touching, or touching. Yeah, so it's just touching there. We're going to flip it over the other side and see how it looks. Not bad, just touching very, very close. So the spacing on the dropouts is 1/48, And so it comes in 3 mils. So basically from here to here, the inside needs to be 142. And it's at 146, which is fine because we're going to put in a bridge tube now. And when you put in a bridge tube and you nickel silver it, it always pulls in. So that's fine. There we go. That's our bridge tube. So I got the bridge tube there. I think the bridge tube is going to come back just a little bit. So I'm going to redraw it and then I'll measure how far it is. I think I want the bridge tube to be right about there. And then 1/2 inch. How does that look for 1/2 inch? Maybe I'll measure. So I put it, look, see that mark there I put there? That's exactly 1/2 inch. So my eyeball is working well today. My micrometer. So away from the bottom bracket shell, we are 7/8 of an inch. So if I measure from here to the other stay, 7/8 of an inch, I'll know how long to make the bridge tube. This is a little bit rough, but so I'm going 7/8 off the shell, off the center line of the Bosch shell. It's not a bottom bracket shell, so I call it a Bosch shell. Whether that's correct or not, I don't know. Okay, so I've made some marks, and if I take the vernier in between the marks, that's about how long it's going to be. So if I cut off a little bit more than that, then I'm good. See here how it's a curve, so where do you start from? That's a little hard to know. So we'll just kind of guess. We'll take the curve like that. Measure that angle, and I can always file a little bit. So the angle off the 90 is 21 degrees. Got a nice big hole saw to match that ovalization of the chainstay. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a red felt pen and I'm going to mark a line right down there so that when I put it in there, if the red line is always on the top, I know that my miters are matching up. So I've got a special little tool for that. If I want to mark a line on a tube and I want it to be straight, if I put this piece of extrusion, there, I just got a perfectly straight line. So on a smaller tube, that's not going to work like that, is it? But I've got a smaller piece, look at that. There, I just put a line right down that's perfectly straight. So I put that in the vise, put the red line on top. When I flip it round, everything lines up. Take off the least amount. There we go. That's how long the bridge tube needs to be. It's in between those two red lines that are 7/8 of an inch back. So if I put this up against that red line and I make a mark, that's where I cut to. So I might cut a little bit long because I can always make it shorter. So I want the line to be up. I'm also eyeballing this way because I want the bridge tube to be level. And that looks level to me. Yep, happy with that. So I'll take off the burrs, we'll braze it in. So when you braze in a bridge tube, you always put the chainstays vertical. And then the weight of gravity holds this down. And then I'm eyeballing between this and the bottom of the tube. And I like that there because I got an equal space. And now I put some flux on there and then I tack it on the bottom. If you tack it on the top, it wants to lift up. Don't want that. You always tack it on the bottom. I got about a medium flame here. If you put a little bit of heat on each side, it hardens up the flux, and the flux acts a little bit like a glue. I mean, it's not going to hold a lot, but it stops it from moving. So that's why I do a little bit on each side. Okay, so now's the time to check and make sure we're still aligned. And how is the alignment? Now that's good. So I've tacked on this side and tacks on the bottom, so it's going to press down. So I'm going to move the frame around so that this here is horizontal, and then I can braze all around it. Okay, it's flowing now. And we are round on that side. Okay, so now we'll do the other side. Okay, it's all flowed in. So we can check the alignment when it cools just a little bit, and then we're basically done. That's our show for today. We'll be doing part 3, the seat stays, next time. So thank you for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great week.